My name is Charmaine Minniefield. I'm a visual artist. My work seeks to preserve Black narratives by remembering the ancestors. I believe in remembering our ancestors and venerating them as a way to ensure our future. I believe that by remembering them, it's an act of resistance against erasure. And I use my own cultural identity, my own ancestral memory to form my body of work and inform what I feel like should be the ethics and principles of today. I have focused or centered a lot of my work recently on the ring shout. The ring shout is a traditional African-American worship practice that was created during enslavement in North America, where our ancestors, because they had taken our drums and not allowed us to communicate, which was a form of communication, our drums, gathered in small spaces called praise houses and created a collective drum out of the floor and beat their feet on the floor. We formed a circle and we sang in call and response, and that was called the ring shout. That ceremony of worship during enslavement was evidence of our African traditional ceremonial practices. It was our African identity, and that alone, that assertion of African identity is what is resistance and is what I'm studying. So I've been creating work based on and influenced by the ring shout now for a number of years. I was inspired by a praise house that I discovered in South Georgia that had been rescued from a construction, a development, and a small heritage organization, the Geechee Kunda Heritage Organization, had rescued this praise house and put it up on cinder blocks, and it was under a tarp, and they had hoped to get funding and support in order to restore it. So I dedicated my work to restoring that praise house, and eventually that led to commission for my most recent public art work, Remembrance as Resistance, Preserving Black Narratives, presented by Flux Projects, sponsored by the City of Atlanta's Office of Cultural Affairs, the National Black Arts, and the National Endowment for the Arts. This project will honor 800 unmarked graves that were recently discovered in Oakland Cemetery, Atlanta's historically segregated cemetery. I used the praise house and the idea of constructing a replica of the praise house, a place of worship where we would gather, as an act of resistance. I use that as an act of resistance today, remembering our ancestors, preserving our narratives against erasure, and therefore the removal of our contribution to contemporary society, devaluing ourselves throughout history, or being devalued as society had done for so many years, had obviously created an inequity, which leads to the issues that we exist today. While here in West Africa, my goal is to, just like in Southwest Atlanta, where I'm from, or in the Black church, I want to point out all of the elements that are obviously African. And here in West Africa, I look at all of the elements as they are in their original state, but I've lived or experienced in the diaspora, in my own lived experience in North America. And I see movement. I see movement and gatherings, and I'm excited about how Islam even expresses in West Africa and how African it is. It's distinctly African, like no other iteration of Islam. It looks African, and that Africanism, that Africanness is what also preserved Blackness in North America, in Southern Christian traditions, in Pentecostal traditions, that is the ring shout. Those African elements is what made Christianity an entirely new religion once African people started to practice it. The same is happening here, I can see, in Islam. And I see that in the by-fall tradition. I see patchwork fabric repurposed the same way we did freedom quilts in the South. I see large congregational gatherings in circle with praise songs that are call and response that lift up the people, the practitioners, the worshipers in spirit. And that same thing happened in Pentecostal spaces in my churches that we were raised in. So I'm looking for those encoded cultural connections, and that's what's gotten me to this place. Here in the Gambia, I don't speak much Wolof. I always say Tuti Wolof. Tuti Wolof. But I still somehow am able to communicate. Families, women, I always go to women first, women collectives, connections. They're welcoming me and welcoming my efforts to learn the language because, and I know this, there are obvious similarities between our traditions. Our expression, our aesthetic, our colorful expression and aesthetic that it continues to express throughout the diaspora. I want to point out how the parading tradition, I just want to go there, parading tradition comes out of African ceremony, expresses in carnival in the Caribbean, in the second line band of the South, in the New Orleans Indians of New Orleans, when they met the indigenous and took their feather and ceremonial garb into an African expression. All of those are traces of us. Still, how we wrap our heads in galays, how we, knocker earrings in the 90s, all come from Fulani earrings, out of West Africa. And many of us in the U.S. or throughout the diaspora, we held those traditions so dear. But it was always just so reaffirming because family, always is what we came back to. We always come back to family. And here in the Gambia, that's what I feel in my bones. I feel family, So people tell me as I walk the streets that I look Fulani, so I'm learning Fula. But what I'm most interested in here, while I'm here, is researching and finding Black narratives that connect to my own ancestral family line. And those Black narratives that house all of our African preserving traditions, those African elements that even while Abrahamic religion entered into our indigenous spaces, those elements that preserved our African selves, that makes Islam so distinct in West Africa, that makes African American Christianity, the Black church so distinct. I'm really looking at and hoping to find and celebrate and lift up those elements while I'm here. I'm seeking indigenous traditions. I'm seeking African indigenous ceremony. I am trying to connect with the sisters who are continuing the batik and tie-dye tradition of indigo. I have created my own studio here at my compound. I'm hoping to build my own home here and start to welcome artists who want to come to the Gambia to do the similar research. I'm creating short films while I'm here. I'm collaborating with Gambian artists. I'm even also connecting to a network of Gambian activists who, this is a really pivotal and dynamic time in world history, and Gambia has got something to say about it too, and I'm connecting with that network. A lot of my work, I consider it art activism because I consider ancestral veneration as an act of resistance against erasure. Much of the inequity that we see worldwide is just the lack of acknowledgement. The lack of acknowledgement of our contribution towards society and compensation for that contribution. Equitable, just compensation for that contribution. And anything else other than that is erasure. It really is. It's oppression. And my work seeks to reverse that by lifting up Black narratives, by lifting up Black intellectual property, by lifting up Black wealth and abundance, by reclaiming our ancestral memories, and by doing so, uniting us across the waters, and bringing us home to Africa. That's the goal of my being in the Gambia. I'm a muralist. I do large-scale paintings of ancestors or women-centered themes on large buildings. My work usually incorporates an element of Ankara African fabric. I consider my work, most of them are designed as patches or small spaces that are reminiscent of freedom quilts, where our ancestors encoded messages of how to make it to freedom. And so a lot of my murals have symbolism to that end. And I'm excited that we are going to be doing a mural here in the Gambia, in Westfield, at a community center over 500 feet long wall with the youth over there. And we're going to be working with local Gambian artists to execute this project. So while I've been here in the Gambia, it's been a rites of passage for me because a lot of the materials that I normally work with in my visual art practice are not available to me. So I have had to expand, and I'm excited to expand actually inward. I've had to sort of think about my work and how it's been informed and inspired by my ancestors. And that came at the time that the pandemic was happening, and I had just gotten word of the loss of my 17-year-old niece to COVID. And in that mourning process and prayer, I began to call on my ancestral memory of the ring shout, my own memory of shouting and movement and dance. So I created a visual short film that I consider a meditation prayer of myself dancing in collaboration with 8 other women who were dancing in their own separate spaces, safe spaces. And we edited the entire project into a short film that we presented during Juneteenth. And Juneteenth is the celebration in the US that acknowledges liberation. So we presented this prayer meditation shot in the Gambia in collaboration with women all over the diaspora and mostly US in prayer. And so that piece was presented. While here in the Gambia, while the pandemic was raging in the entire world, we're really grateful that our numbers are down in terms of cases and deaths, but the impact is great. Our tourist industry wiped out, even the markets were all being affected. The economy was shaken. So just being here in the Gambia, being the activist and having the network that I have, I thought to connect to a local foundation, the Smiling Coast Foundation. This is the network of activists that we've connected to who wanted to help. And so we started to raise money, and our fundraising made it possible for us to give out 100 bags of rice. And we're still raising money to give more out here forward. I've been inspired by, I have to say my mother. My mother was an artist as well. She was a young mother. Really, I just remember her being so beautiful, and her doodles, her drawing on paper, just at a very young age inspired me. She had been inspired by her uncle, our Uncle Junie, who would build small boxes and small houses, a whole town actually, out of popsicle sticks and found objects. He was a genius, Uncle Junie was. Anyway, so I come from a line of artists. My mother's an interior designer and so that informs my work. I think that, I've had amazing art educators. College was a strong, I think, foundation for me on my political side. And then I used to produce the National Black Arts Festival. One of my earliest jobs of employment was to produce the National Black Arts Festival. So I was raised professionally among, I think, the most recognized and honored Black artists of my generation and of our time. I consider many of them mentors, and I'm grateful for that. My goal while here in Gambia is to build my own personal home, but in a way that allows me to host artists from throughout the diaspora. I'm inspired by Kehinde Wiley's Black Rock Project in Senegal. And in Atlanta, I have participated in a number of artist residencies. I've sat on many boards. I've been a part of major, multi-million-dollar projects and initiatives, and I don't see any limitations to doing similar work here in the Gambia, especially now that we're all equipped with technology that can bridge us across the oceans. So I am extending an invitation to the world to come. I would like to see a curated group of artists in collaboration with me and my work, focus on the ring shout, focus on the praise house work and remembrance as resistance, preserving Black narratives by seeking ancestral lines and history and memories while here in West Africa as an artist residency program. I have a list of Black women artists that I've always been just taken by. Elizabeth Catlett in her treatment of a Black woman's body and is unmatched. Allison and Betty Sarr, the mother and daughter team that has, I think changed everything for all of us, but their assemblage work and shrine images and symbolism, especially also around Black women's stories. There are a number of local Atlanta favorites that I've considered mentors and friends that have influenced my work. Tina Dunkley, Akua McDaniels, Lynn Marshall Linnemeyer. I hope to be the bridge to the rest of the world for the Gambian art community. I'd love to inspire more work, more innovative, creative expression, and present that work on an international platform. Be of whatever support I can. I do this in Atlanta with all my collaborators and colleagues in my community. In Atlanta, our cultural ecosystem is very dynamic, very strong. We support each other. We spread the word. We put our flyers on. We sit on each other's panels. We serve on each other's boards. And that's the kind of energy that I want to bring to the Gambia and invite to the Gambia, which has led me to collaborating with folks like Olimata Tall and others, and even the Smiling Coast Foundation. It all comes from that space, which to me, it emulates the ring shout. It insists on community in spite of circumstances, distance, time, funding, pandemics. We still find each other and make it happen. I'd like to build connections to the universities and the higher education community here in the Gambia by highlighting the work that they're doing, inviting scholars from the US and the Gambia to collaborate and connect on similar topics of interest. I have a number of colleagues through my previous positions at Spelman University to my current position at Emory University, who all have sincere interest in making those connections. We've been working with a local historian who's the keeper of oral histories in the Gambia, and connecting those oral histories and that work, that preservation work, to the work that we have been doing in Atlanta with the Emory's Rare Book Archives Library, the Stuart A. Rose Library, who hosts my artist residency. So I'm hoping that from the academic standpoint and scholarly work, that those connections can continue to be made while I'm here in the Gambia. Well, I think art is the heartbeat of humanity. I think art is the one thing we all have. It's a cultural expression. It's the container of our collective memories. It is our actual truth. In terms of our identity. And I believe that if we allow for our honest expression of our work, that there will be understanding, there will be equity by virtue of that understanding, and there'll be, I think, sincere healing and value through art. I've made art a sustainable practice for my family and my community. And I say that because I have lived off of my work since solely. I have not been employed since 2004. And because I have seen myself as the artist in my community. I am the one that people go to when they want original art. I'm the one that people go to when they want to be culturally exposed to new performances or museums or galleries. I am a source of cultural information. I serve that purpose in my community. I acknowledge my community as my patrons, just like a museum would. I give them recognition as my patrons, and I engage them that way, and they welcome it. Auntie or uncle, they want to be acknowledged and given a reception at the end of the year, just like the gala of the National Black Arts Festival. It may be a small barbecue, right outside my studio, but just having those practical practices, it really made everything possible. And so still today, there's about 20 people that I can text, couples, families, folks that I can text, who are patrons that I say, okay, I have an exhibition coming up and I need materials. Here's my Cash App. And they support me. And then, and it sort of grows from there. I think that would be my advice to a young emerging artist or an emerging artist, is recognize your value within your network and work your network. People want to be supportive and they want to be culturally, they want to be cultural themselves. They want to be traveled and informed. And also they want to be inspired by your sincere, honest narrative. So tell it. I think that for me, I insisted that people see my work and value it by asserting my own personal narrative, my own personal story, owning it, exploring it, standing in it, expressing from that space, not trying to sort of fit into the cookie cutter or the expectations of others, and not even gallerists. I did not wait to be curated into anyone's exhibitions. I did not only submit and pay those fees, and I created spaces myself. I went to old homes and knocked on doors and said, "Can I show my work here?" Because my work is historic. I made a gallery out of a tunnel, under a bridge once, by projecting inside of it. So I think that, just being innovative and being distinct to myself, I think is when everything changed. Like once I didn't conform to anyone else's model, I just created my own. I have a studio in Atlanta. It's called, my community-based programming is called the New Freedom Project. And it's just that. And we want to look at how does freedom look today, and we want to live free. That's really what the work is. But it presses art and activism, the New Freedom Project. And I have this amazing team in Atlanta, and I'm formed this amazing team here in the Gambia. So now I'm literally like international, creating art from both spaces. In Atlanta, I have a team of Black women creatives that I deploy to execute my murals. We did a freedom quilt at Ponce City Market, recently sponsored by Glossier. And we do these big, huge productions. And there's a couple of amazing murals that are already in production. Mercedes-Benz is one of my sponsors. And they're planting a tree in my name. They're planting a tree in my honor in Atlanta. That's gonna be interesting. I see myself in 5 years living between Atlanta and the Gambia, hosting artists in an artist residency here in the Gambia. I have located a property on the beach. I'd like to see new work happen around my Praise House project. The Praise House project will go on tour in the U.S. and in West Africa. By then, in that tour, I hope to start here in the Gambia and move around West Africa. And that is to bring or construct a Praise House here. Don't let anyone tell you no. You can't accept no for an answer. Whatever you want to do, you completely have the power to do it. So do it.